Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight's class, a couple things are on the docket for this evening. We'll go over week 9 or chapter 9 homework, queuing analysis. We'll do that first. I think I covered everything in chapter 9 that I need to cover. That's going to be the last chapter of material for this class. So we'll go over the homework and whatever you'd like to do, spend as much time on that as you'd like. And then we have to review for the final exam, which is going to be next week. Okay, and I'll also, I promised you guys that I put the take-home on Blackboard. I think I emailed it to you guys as well. And we'll go over that to make sure you understand, what's going to be on the final in class and what's going to be what the final take-home comprises. So the final exam is actually next week. Okay, April 7th. And I think I told you if you'd like an extension on the take home, if that's problematic for you to get it into me next week, you can have that. The week of April 14th or April 14th, I'm going to be away, so we won't have class that day. So it kind of worked out well in that gives you, basically 2 weeks from your final exam to complete your final project, as those will be presented on April 21st. Okay, and we'll also talk about that. I know I've got some questions about the final project. And whatever time we have left, and we should have a considerable amount of time left this evening, you guys can feel free to use that as group time to work on your project, to ask me any questions about your project, to kind of uncover things about your project. So that's our game plan for this evening. So just to kind of review, what we're talking about in chapter 9 is queuing analysis, and a queue is a waiting line. Okay, and it's studying the world of business because in a lot of retail applications we have waiting lines. You go to an Applebee's or a Chili's or a Walmart or Disney World or the doctor's office or a convenience store. There are waiting lines, and we want to study these things so we can understand what kind of experience our customers may be having. Now, one of the first things we defined is, we can define a queue based on a few measures, okay? First off is the arrival process, how things or people arrive according to the queue. And it can be deterministic, meaning we know every minute something's going to come, or every second, or every day. That's deterministic, or it can happen according to a probability distribution. We talked about different types of probability distribution. One being the normal curve or natural curve. That's a general distribution. But the one that's probably most common, the one we most commonly observe when we're talking about humans arriving at a queue, is something called the Poisson distribution. And it is a Markovian distribution. It belongs to the Markovian class of distribution. So typically when we talk about a queue, the first thing we classify is the arrival pattern. And probably 9 times out of 10, it is Markovian, so we say M. Okay. The second thing we talk about is the service process. How fast are we serving these things? So just like the arrival process, it can be general, deterministic, or Markovian, but a lot of times we're talking about exponential, which also belongs to service. The next thing we talk about is the number of servers, and we use the letter variable k to indicate the number of servers. And a lot of times we omit these last two because we assume they're infinite, but we also have the system size and the population size. And what that means, the system size is how much my system can handle. And remember, the system of a queue is things waiting in line and being served. So if I have, if 5 people can wait in line and I have 2 servers, the system size is actually 7. Okay, we have the queue and we have the system. The population size is the number of things that can enter my queue. So I think the example we saw was like a work site. There's only 4 work sites, and these are the only 4 things that could enter the Vice President of Construction's queue. So a lot of times those last 2 we assume is infinite. Now when we look at an arrival process, we typically try to define a measure of that, and we use the symbol lambda so for a rate of arrival. So 10 customers per hour, 20 customers per hour, whatever it might be. And we typically use the symbol mu, or average, for the service time. So 10 customers per hour, 20 customers per hour. We have to have a greater service rate, cumulative service rate, than arrival rate, or our queue will never achieve what? For us to be able to measure some things, the queue has to be in what state, we call it? It has to be in steady state. Okay? Steady state happens when the effective service rate is greater than the effective arrival rate, and we're beyond that startup period. What do we call that startup period in our queue? What do we call that startup period? And I might use the barber example. I go to the barber in Portage, there's 5 old men waiting, at 8 o'clock for him to open the door. We call it a transitionary period. It's not like normal process, right? Because it just started, right? Sometimes it takes things to get churning a little bit. So to achieve steady state, it has to be beyond the transitionary period, and the effective service rate has to be greater than effective arrival rate. We also said there are things we can measure, okay? And there's also kind of complex some formulas behind the scenes that we can use, but we can measure a lot of things. We can measure the average number of people in the system, the average number of people in the queue. Okay, the system is people waiting in line and people being served. The queue is just waiting line. The average time in the system, the average time in the queue. So average time in the system is how long you spend in the whole process, waiting in line and being served. And W sub Q, waiting time in the queue, is just how long you spend waiting. The probability that someone waits, right, is another thing. P sub W, the probability that you have to wait is P sub W. P sub 0 is probably no one's in the system. P sub 1, one person in the system. And I think the other thing we measured was rho. Okay, rho is the percentage of times that our servers are busy. So when we do these, and for the actual final exam in the in-class portion, you're not going to have to solve a queue, but I'm going to give you a word problem. You have to identify it. Is it as an MM3 queue or an MM5 queue or maybe an MG2? And then you have to figure out what lambda and mu is, right? Because that's what you need to know to be able to use a template or any kind of system. You have to identify that queue. So that would be what the problem would be like. So I assigned a handful of these. Hopefully you found them easy. But if you did not, that's not a problem. We will go over a couple. Let's see. I know I assigned you to select one of these, not all of them, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's look at, how about number 4? Let's do number 4, okay? That was one I signed, Dylan? Yes, okay. On Saturdays, customers arrive at Patterson's customer, Joel's, according to a Poisson distribution at a mean rate of 7 per hour. So we know right now we have an M arrival, and lambda kind of gives it to us is 7 per hour. Okay, so mark down what we know at this point. The store has 4 clerks. Okay, so that's my K, right? That's 4 clerks. The 4 clerks working on Saturday, the time a clerk spends with a customer follows an exponential distribution. Okay, looks like we're Markovian. Is exponential distribution with a mean of 20 minutes. Okay, so we need to get a mu here. So if I can do 1 customer every 20 minutes, that means how many per hour? Well, you can probably do that in your head, but if we cross multiply and divide, we have a rate of 3 per hour. Okay? So our mu is 3 per hour. For security reasons, the entrance to the store is locked, and a maximum of 8 customers can be present in the store at any one time. It is assumed that customers who are not granted admittance to the store will leave and shop elsewhere. Determine the percentage of customers who will not be granted admittance to the store. Okay. So it's an MM4 8Q, right? Because the system size, the store, for whatever reason, only allows 8 people in. So it's an MM4 8Q. The population size we're assuming is infinite. Yes? So we have, as you guys know, we have a great deal of templates that have these formulas built into them that we use for queuing analysis. So if we look at this one, we have an MMKFQ, right? Because we have an MM, we have some number of servers, and it's finite, so we're going to use the MMKF template. The lambda, I think, is 7. Oops. The mu is 3. The K is 4. And our system capacity is 8. Okay, so it gives us an analysis of that queue. Note, and I know I'm going to come back to the 4, but if I put 2 for this number of servers, it still worked, but it shouldn't have worked. Now let's just go back to 4. Okay. All right, so if we analyze this, a couple things. The average number of people in the system is about 2.5. The average number of people waiting in line is about a quarter person. The average time in the system is 0.37. If you turn that in your take-home, 0.37, probably take off a point. Why? 0.37 hours. Really better to do that in what? Multiply it by 60 and put it in terms of minutes, right? You're not going to say 0.37. That's not how we talk to one another, how you communicate. So 0.37 hours, time in line, 0.037 hours, not a lot of time. The probability they wait is only 25%, that's not so bad. Our servers are busy 57% of the time. I think what it asked for is what's the probability that someone arrives and they can't get into our system? How would I find that? The probability that someone arrives and can't get into our system. When is our system closed? When there are how many people in the system? When there are 8 people. What's the probability that there are 8 people in our system? Right there, okay? About 1.3% of the time, we have 8 people in the system. So if we assume people are arriving, in a random pattern, we're assuming it's closed 1.3% of the time. So about 1.3% of the customers, will not be able to get into our system. Does that make sense? Yes? I'll give you guys an economic one. I want to do an economic one. Let's is there one you guys want to do, or I'll just choose another one? Is there one you guys would like to do particularly? Okay, let's take a look at 23. All right, the telephone systems at Wavy Radio has 6 incoming phone lines and 2 operators to take listener requests for music. If both operators are busy, a customer is normally placed on hold. If all 6 phone lines are busy, however, callers will get a busy signal and probably not call back. Customers' call to Wavy can be modeled by a Poisson process with a mean rate of 50 per hour. The service time follows an exponential distribution with a mean of 90 seconds. What is the probability that a caller will be placed on hold? Okay, well, you guys tell me what kind of queue, what kind of system do we have here? Let's classify our system. I heard a Poisson arrival, an exponential service time. How many servers? So that's an MM. How many servers did I have here? Or operators, I guess, in this case. 2. And anything else about this system? There are only 6 phone lines, right? So it's an MM26 system. Now a couple things that I want now. I want my lambda. It says my lambda, they're coming in at a rate of 50 per hour. Okay, so 50 per hour. And I think our servers can do one customer every, 90 seconds? Or 1.5 minutes. So how many customers can they do in 60 minutes? Well, I'm going to cross multiply. I get 1.5 mu is equal to 60. Divide both by 1.5. So I get a service rate of 40 per hour. Now, if I only had one server, no good because it wouldn't be in steady state. But I have 2 servers, so I have an effective service time of 80. So I need to go to my MMKF template once again. My lambda is 50. My mu is 40. I have 2 servers. And my system capacity is 6. Okay, so let's take a look at what it's asking to interpret. What is the probability that a caller will be placed on hold? Okay, what does that mean, placed on hold? It's the same as the probability that they do what?
They're in the line.
What's that?
They're in the queue.
They're in the queue, and the probability that they're doing what? Waiting, okay? So that's represented by P sub W. Now, your book may you guys check the answers for this? Did it say 45%? Does anyone know? Did you guys check the answers? No? Okay. Your book may have figured out or may have factored in this other thing, okay, when it talks about probability. Think about when you call in. There's really 3 outcomes. Well, let's just say there's 2 main outcomes. What's one outcome that can happen when you call into wavy radio? Okay, you get through, right? Okay. The other outcome is it's a dead end, right? It's a busy signal, you hang up, end of story, yes? So what's the probability that it's end of story? So if you want to draw that as a probability tree, what's the probability that you get a busy signal? How can we figure that out? What's the probability that that it ends here? You call in and nothing happens. What's the probability that I get a busy signal? That the system is filled to capacity.
2.8%.
Very good. So let's call it 2.9%. Okay, 0.029. So if roughly 3% of people are getting a busy signal, how many people are getting through? How many people are getting through?
0.07.
Yeah, 1 minus 0.029, which would be 0.971, right? It has to add to 100%. Does that make sense? So these are the people that are on busy signal. These are the people that are getting through. Now, the only ones that can wait are this group, right? The ones that actually get through. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
Where did you get the 0.029?
What's the probability that there are 6 customers in the system?
Oh, okay.
Which means what? We only have 6 lines. That's the percentage of times that the whole system is filled. So 2.9% of the time, busy signal. 97.1% of the time they get through, okay? Once they get through, then they can have all these things. So once they get through, the probability that they wait is, 46%. Probability that they don't wait then, we'll say is 54%. So I know we didn't do much probability tree-wise in this class, but really there's 3 outcomes here, right? There's a busy signal. That happens 2% of the time, 2.9% of the time we're done. There's a chance that we get through and we have to wait, and there's a chance we get through and we don't have to wait, right? So if it wants to know, and do we do probability traits a little bit here? Maybe a little bit? If I want to know the probability that they get through and they have to wait, how do I find the probability of taking this path? I'd multiply the 97% times the 46% roughly. I don't know what that comes out to, but roughly maybe 42% or 43%. Because I'm not going to make you do that, but I think that's what the book answer said. Did you guys notice that if you looked at the book? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying, of all the people that call, well, we can funnel out 3% of them right now because they don't even get in the damn system, right? This only applies to people that get in the system. Does that make sense? So these people don't even get in the system. So we can get rid of those right off the top. On the average, how many callers are on hold? What would I look at for this? On average, how many callers are on hold? What would I look for? So this is knowing what the measures stand for. How many customers are on hold? Right. L is the number of people in the system on average, right? That's either waiting in line, on hold is waiting in line, or being served. L sub Q is the average number of people in the system that are waiting. Okay, they're in a queue, if you will. Okay, and that's about 0.5, about half a person, you know, is on average waiting on hold. If a caller does not get a busy signal, what is the average total time spent waiting on hold and speaking to an operator? What would I look at for that? If the customer doesn't get a busy signal, so now we're saying, hey, of the customers that get through, what is the odds or what is the time they spend either waiting on hold or being served? So this is the whole damn system. What would I look at for that? The whole system. Waiting in line and being served. W, right? W is the average time spent in the system, right? That counts waiting in line and being served. W sub Q is only the time spent on hold, right? So 0.035 hours, because I entered hours, that's represented by hours. I would have to convert that to minutes. What is the probability that there's exactly one caller on hold? Let's think about this. What's the probability that there's exactly one caller on hold? Well, we have two servers, right? Two servers. So what's the probability that there's exactly one person on hold? How can we figure that out from off the book? That's probably exactly one person on hold. What's happening if there's one person on hold? There's two people being served and another person, one person on hold, right? So how would I find it? How many people in the total system then, Thurston? 3. Probability of 3 people in the system, about 11.8% of the time. Okay. So, you know, just plugging in the numbers is one thing, but knowing how to interpret them and use them is another thing, and that's really what's important in this class. Okay. Any other questions on the homework? All right. Then let's talk about the final exams, all right? What do you want to talk about first, the take-home or the in-class? Your choice. Your time. I don't care. Let's talk about the take-home. All right. So the take-home, hopefully you have discovered or saw my email or just ran into, is now available under take-home exams, final exam, and it says MBA final take-home spring 2005, okay? It is worth 40 points. It is, once again, I want you to solve these to completion using Excel. It will be handed in next week, or if you'd like an extension, I can extend it, but you need to hand it in at some point, okay? It doesn't, once again, have to be in the most beautiful format, but I do want it delivered to me on paper and hard copy. Right? Don't try to email it to me. That never works well. Okay. So I do want it on. It doesn't have to be perfectly bound, or it doesn't have to have a cover page and a picture of me or anything like that. But this is what I'd like you to do. Okay. So let's take a look at each one of these. The first one is a textbook problem, and it's in chapter 5, Chapter 5, if you recall, were project management models. And it would like you to do number 16 of our textbook, and along with completing parts A through D, so you do as is in the text, also answer part E below, which is one that I threw out there. So identify the critical path of this project. So number 16 on page 315 says the Platters, a rock and roll group, has to do some activities for their concert. And it provides us a precedence relationship chart. And a precedence relationship chart gives us what? It gives us all the activities, and it gives us the relationship, the predecessors. So if you notice, A weights on nothing on this chart, B weights on higher or A, C weights on B, D weights on B, E weights on B, F weights on E, so forth and so on, right? So we need to plug that in. It also gives us the 3-time estimate approach. So the 3-time estimate approach gives us the most likely case, the optimistic and pessimistic approach. Okay, so what we're going to use for that, if you guys recall, is in chapter 5. So if I go to material by chapter, chapter 5, which is project management, we had a PERT CPM template. And this thing was a little bit kludgy, a little bit funky, but we had to enter the activities in column A. It would assign the node to it then, right? As soon as I type in here, it'll say A. Here's the 3-time estimate approach. A is worst case, or no, best case scenario. M is most likely. B is worst case scenario, which is provided you in that precedence relationship chart. I either give it a 3-time estimate approach, or I give it mean and standard deviation. So in this case, I'm just going to use these 3 columns. I'm not going to use these 2 columns. And then I need to tell it about my predecessors. I want to plug in my predecessor. I'm going to hit Tool, Solver, Solve. And then I'm going to go to, and it's not going to do anything. You're going to say, uh-oh, what happened here? But if you recall, then we have to go to the Output tab and hit Tools, Solver, Solve as well. It is going to give us, if you did things right, an average completion time and a standard deviation for the project completion time. If you remember this little box here, if I plug in a completion time, it'll tell me the probability the project is done before that time. So let's look and see what A through D is asking us. Give an estimated completion time for this project. Boom, that's our mean. Which activities have the most slack? You can determine that through column K. What is the probability the project will be completed in 12 weeks? Okay, 12 weeks. So I'm guessing this is measured in weeks. So I'm going to plug 12 in there, and it'll tell us the probability it's done in 12 weeks or less. And finally, it says give a time within which the station can be 99% sure of completing this project. So it's not going to be the mean completion time. I'm going to kind of have to do trial and error to find a time that I know it's going to be complete 99% of the time, right? So it's going to be higher than the mean. Now there's a formula you can use called norm inverse, okay, which I plug in, but you don't have to use that. Just use trial and error, or you can go use something called goal seek, but you need to find the probability, the time that's going to be done 99% of the time. We're happy with this time. Part E, I think I asked you, also identify the critical path. And you can do that through this. So this one should be easy, right? 516 should be pretty easy. All right, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, what if you keep coming up with that error in the objective cell or a constraint cell?
When you click solve?
Just when you input the data. Yeah, you gotta click solve,
Uh-huh.
and it just keeps giving you that.
It is.
I know there's some fickle things.
Yeah, there's some very fickle things. So one of the things I would recommend that you do, okay, is pull a blank template from Blackboard. Just start fresh, because sometimes people screw up a couple formulas in there and they have something out of whack. And then you could even copy in your activities, and copy that in, and try it again that way. Now, if you're still having issues, it's not going to be issues with your activities or your most likely times. It's probably issues with your precedence relationship chart. Okay, so if you see the set cell values don't converge, that means it's an unbounded solution, meaning the constraints aren't constraining it enough. It's saying like infinity, right? If that's what you're saying. Now, what are you saying?
It says solver encountered an error value and objective sale order constraints though.
Yeah, that sounds like you have the template screwed up.
I mean, there's only one way to input it, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It should work.
How's it start?
Let me say this, it's not the template. The template will work. So there's something you have screwed up with it, guaranteed. All right, any questions on number 516? All right, now let's look at, where is it? Okay. Number 2, okay, we moved to decision analysis, which is on, and it's another textbook question, which is page 380 of your textbook. We want to do number 22 and number 23, okay? 22 is unique in that it doesn't just give you the payoff table, it kind of makes you work for the payoff table. It gives you a set of conditions, and you have to calculate out the payoff table. Once you do have the payoff table, well, that makes it easy, right? Then you can use the decision payoff template, which I'll show you where that is in a second. So if we go to Blackboard, and we go to Material by Chapter, and we go to Chapter 6, you see the decision payoff table template, okay? And I'm going to build in my payoff table here. And it's going to give me all those values for minimax, max, and max regret. Now, this one's a little bit funky though. It says, TV Town must decide how many, if any, 50-inch TV sets to order for next month. The sets cost TV Town $18.50 each and sell for $2,450 each. Because Panasonic is coming out with a new line of big screen TVs, any sets not sold during the month will have to be marked down to 50% of the normal retail price to be sold at TV Town clearance. TV Town estimates that it does not have enough TV sets on hand to satisfy demand. It will suffer a goodwill loss of $150 for each customer who cannot get a set. Defining states of nature to correspond to the number of sets demanded by customers and decision alternatives to the number of sets ordered. Determine the payoff table for TV Town. Okay, it says that the maximum demand will be 3 months for 3 TVs. So what's the lowest number of TVs we can order? So let's talk about our decision alternatives. What's the lowest amount of TVs I can order? Go ahead, Adam.
0.
0, right? And what's the most I should ever order, given that I just told you that demand won't ever be more than 3? 3. So my decision alternatives are 4 in nature. I can order 0 TVs, 1, 2, and 3. Demand for these TVs could be 0, 1, 2, or 3 as well. Now a couple of things are nice, okay? If I order 0 TVs and demand is 0, how much money do I make? Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? 0. If demand is 1 and, demand is 1 and I order 1 TV, how much do I make? And think about it, it says I can sell them for $24.50 and they cost me $18.50. So how much do I make? $24.50 minus $18.50? $600, yes? Okay. So the same thing, 2 and 2 would be $1,200, 3, $1,800. Okay. Now, where you have to do a little work is let's say I order 1 TV and demand is 0. Okay, no one wants any of my TVs. Well, it says I can get rid of them, but what do I have to do to get rid of them? Mark it down by 50%. So it was $24.50. I can sell it at $12.25, right? That's half of $24.50. But that leaves me, what, $18.50 minus $12.25. That means a loss of what for me? $625? Does that make sense? So if this situation happens, I lose $625. Does that make sense? If I order 3 and demand 0, I lose $625 for each. Now, what if let's take a situation like this. I order 1, but demand is 2. Okay, this is where we have to factor a couple things in. I order 1, but demand is 2. Well, the first one I sold at full price and I made how much for it? $600. The second one, a customer wanted that damn TV from me, but I only had one in stock because I only ordered one. What did it say happens when I don't have a TV in stock and someone wants it? Goodwill loss of 150, right? So I made 600 bucks minus the $150 goodwill loss. What goes in here? 450. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
600 we made on the first one.
150.
The second one we incurred a goodwill loss of 150. So this is the total payoff. So you have to, I'm not going to go through the whole table because I've done enough, but you have to go through the whole table and look at those scenarios and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what's happening with these TVs. I'm selling 2 at full price, one at half price. I'm selling 1 at full price, incurring a goodwill, whatever. You know, you have to figure out what the payoff is. Once you have the payoff table, using this template, it should be all good, okay? Because it says determine a payoff table. That's in 22, and then 23. It gives us a demand for next month. So now we have probability involved, right? Now this is no longer a decision under uncertainty. It's a decision under what? When we have some probabilities about the future states of nature, decision under risk, right? So we plug that in. The expected value should tell me how many TVs to order. And the next one is asking about expected value for perfect information, part B. So this is one problem. I know it's 2 in your book, but it's really one problem. Okay, so that's number the second problem. So you shouldn't have much issue with that. Good. Let's look at number 3. Number 3, we move on to chapter 7, which is our forecasting chapter. So do 726 on page 436 of your text. So let's go to page 436. And it gives us, I'm hoping, a time series here. It does. Stay Calm is an e-business that sells equipment to help with people with hypertension. The weekly sales of the company over the past 52 weeks have been as follows. Okay, so I want you to follow my directions here, okay, rather than the book's directions. It says, A, please graph the time series, which we did, right? You guys remember us doing that. Add a trend line, including the regression equation and the R squared value. So, and it says interpretive prob. Interpretive prob means we need to determine if this is a stationary or a linear trend forecast, right? And then R squared value kind of tells us, yes, you guys remember that analysis we did? What would the forecast for month 11 be using the last period technique? That should be pretty simple. What would the forecast for month 11 be using a 3-month moving average? I read 36, but I'm really on 26, okay? If I'm using a 3-month moving average, you can pretty much tell what the trend is. Using an exponential smoothing model with a smoothing constant of 0.4 to forecast month 11. And then finally, part F, use solver to find the optimal smoothing constant will minimize the MAPE. You guys remember us doing that? Go ahead, sir.
Isn't the same tab, like exponential smoothing, you use for E and F? Or would you use a solver for?
Yes, you're going to use the exponential smoothing tab,
Yeah.
and then you're going to do solver. You're going to say, I want to minimize the MAPE value.
with-
Changing the variable cell will be the smoothing constant. And the only constraint we have, if you guys remember, is that smoothing constant had to be less than 1, between 0 and 1. And we can make it greater than 0 by checking that box, not negative. Yes, Beth?
For E.
E.
Find the, what was it? Find the constant, wait. Smoothing constant, so find for month 11?
Yeah.
Do you want that before or after solver?
Well, you're gonna do one with 0.4, come up with a forecast value, and then we're gonna say, hey, can we do better? So then we're gonna do solver to see if we can find a better smoothing constant.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So point 4 is going to give you some MAPE, I don't know what it is, but now you're going to say, is there a better smoothing constant out there? So E is an answer, you're going to have a forecast for that, and then you're going to say, hey, let's see if we can pick a better smoothing constant, and I'll have a forecast for that. Okay? Now number 4 is a Miko made up one, so if there's any kind of errors, I apologize. This is a Q, okay? And it's 4 and 5. It really should be just 4, but I don't know. I made it too problem. A local mart offers 2 service areas to its customers. The first service area, Area A, has 3 clerks, while the second service area, Area B, has 6. So we really have 2 queues here. Okay, and I want you to analyze 2 queues, 2 separate templates. There's a service area A, which has its own characteristics, and a service area B that has its own characteristics. So in the part 4, in number 4, we're doing 2 queues at once, right? You're going to have 2 queuing templates up. The service times for each of the 9 clerks follows an exponential distribution with a mean time of 3 minutes. One customer every 3 minutes. So we have to convert that to a service time per hour. Customers arrive at each service area according to a Poisson process. Because of the specific location of the 2 service areas, the second service area, Area B, averages 90 customers per hour. That's how they arrive. While the first, Area A, averages only 40 customers per hour. So I have 2 queues here, right? And I analyze them separately. One, part A says, what is the average time a customer spends waiting in line to beginning service at each of the 2 service areas? You're going to have 2 answers. Service area A, this is how much time. Service area B, this is how much time. What is the average number of customers both waiting in line and being served at each of the 2 service areas? 2 answers once again. What is the probability that there's exactly 1 customer waiting in line at service area B? That's 1 answer. So you're just going to look at the B queue. What is the probability that there are 4 or fewer people waiting in line at service area A? 1 answer. And then this one I guess I should have deleted because it always causes confusion. As a marked customer, which service area would you prefer to use? Justify your answer. I assume that you do not like waiting in line, so I would assume that you pick the service area with the lowest average wait time, right? Okay, so that's the rationale that you should use, all right? So, number 5 is kind of a continuation, okay? We are marked, and we say the hell with having 2 service areas, 2 separate queues. We're going to merge our service areas into 1 queue. So now it's a separate, this is a 3rd queue. MART is considering consolidating the 2 service areas into 1 service area. They suppose that the combined average of 130 customers per hour would arrive at the new location. So there was 90 and 40 between A and B respectively, right? So I'm assuming 130 is going to come into my service queue, right? This new one. Clerks will continue to check customers out at a rate of 3 minutes each, and will earn $10 per hour in salary and benefits. MART feels that the goodwill cost of having a customer waiting in line is $45 per hour, while the goodwill cost of servicing a customer is $20 per hour. How many cashiers should MART employ at this consolidated service area? So this is the economic analysis of a queue. You guys remember we used that queuing template, and we filled in those values, and then we looked, we said, where does it bottom out? That's our answer. Okay? Because two costs are going against each other, the hourly cost and the goodwill cost. They're going to come down to an optimal value, and then they're going to go back up.
So that's like when that dip ends and goes back up. That's
Yes,
your
you'll pick
answer
the
for-
bottom, right? The lowest number, which is the dip. Okay. So that is the take home. As I said, is due either next week or whenever, before the end of the class. Okay. Questions on the take home? Anyone complete the take home yet? No? Looked at a couple? All right. Feel comfortable you can complete it now, Dylan? Okay, let's talk about the in-class exam then. As you might imagine, the in-class exam, so this take-home is 40 points. The in-class exam, once again, is 60 points. Okay, so so 60-40 split. Just as far as format goes, there will be 30 multiple choice. Well, it's open book, open notes, open laptop. Okay, same as always. You'll have the entire class period to work on this, as same as midterm. There are 30 multiple choice. And there are 4 problems. You choose the 3 that you want to do. Okay? So I'm only grading 3 of the 3 that you choose. So you choose 3 of 4. So let's talk about the content of the exam. Obviously, Chapter 5. Okay? Chapter 5 was the first one since midterm that we covered, and that was project management techniques. You need to understand a couple things. What early start means, early finish, late start, late finish, right? Understand early start is the earliest an activity can start, early finish is the earliest it can finish. Late start is the latest it can start without impacting the overall project. Late finish is the latest it can finish without impacting the overall project. Activities that have the same early start and late start are what kind of activities? If they have no wiggle room, no slack, no surplus, we call them what type of activities? Critical path activities. The critical path is the longest path in the network. It is any delay to a critical path activity will delay the project by that delay amount. Some activities have slack or surplus, right? So if an activity has, let's say it has 4 days of slack, and I delay that activity by 3 days, what's going to be the outcome to the project? It has 4 days of slack, I delay it 3 days. I'm all good, right? No delay to the project. Has 4 days of slack, I delay the project 5 days. Day delay, right? I'm able to absorb 4 days of the delay, but not that 5th day. It gets added to the project. So we understand what the critical path is. We understand what slack is, right? Slack is that surplus, that wiggle room. I want you to understand what the 3-time estimate approach is. You know, the most likely case, the best case scenario, and the worst case scenario. I want you to understand the delay situations that I talked about just a few moments ago. Although we didn't do it, we didn't do the templates anyways. What do we call it when we add resources to a project to try to get it done faster? What do we call that topic, that term? It's called crashing a project. Okay. We didn't do that in class. We didn't do the problems, but we're responsible for understanding the concept. Chapter 6 was our decision payoff. Chapter 6, we talked about making decisions. We talked about what a payoff table is. A payoff table has decisions, alternatives. It also has future states of nature. The payoff is what happens if we make that decision and that future happen. That's the payoff we receive. We make decisions under 3 environmental states. One is certainty. Certainty means we know what's going to happen. We didn't deal with any kind of analysis when we have certainty. The 2 we did deal with was uncertainty, which means I have no clue what's going to happen. I don't know what any probability for the future states of nature. We had 4 decision criteria under uncertainty. The first is a pessimistic, conservative approach called the maxim-in. In the maxim-in, I pick the maximum of all the worst case scenarios, right? I pick the best of the worst. I lock in a minimum return, basically. That's the maxim-in approach. An aggressive approach, where we pick the best of the best, was called the max-a-max. Okay, max-I-max, maxi-max. We also talked about, instead of looking at payoffs, we looked at regrets or lost opportunity. And we built a regret table off the payoff table. We said, hey, I could have made 100, instead I made 50. That's good, but I feel $50 worth of regret. So we built a regret table that matched the payoff table. And from that regret table, I used a decision criteria called min-max. Pick the minimum of all the maximum regrets. That also fits a conservative and pessimistic type of decision maker. The last one under uncertainty was principle of insufficient reasoning. And that was kind of a neutral one. All we did was principle of insufficient reasoning is we say, add up all the payoffs for all the decision alternatives, which one everyone's highest, that's the one that wins. We don't know what the hell's going to happen, so basically take the one with the highest average payoff, or the highest average sum, however you want to look at it. Okay, those were the 4 criteria we used for uncertainty. We only used one criteria for risk. What was that criteria called? Where we looked at the payoff, and weighted it with the probability of that payoff. What do we call that criteria?
Weighted average.
It was a weighted average. We also called it expected value, right? Expected value criterion is used a great deal in the world of business, right? That is why the insurance company exists and is profitable. That's why lending institutions exist and are profitable. That is why gambling institutions exist and are very profitable, expected value. So understand that concept, okay? Understand risk versus uncertainty. Understand which of those things are, for pessimistic, conservative, optimistic. Understand those kinds of things. That was chapter 6. Chapter 7 was time series forecasting. In time series forecasting, we look at past history to predict the future. And we said there are 4 components of a time series. Sorry. The first one is linear trend, okay? Or trend, I guess, not just linear trend, but trend. Where's it heading in the long term? It can be stationary, it can have linear trend, it can have exponential trend, but where is it heading in the long term? The trend, that's the first component. The second component is tied to the changing calendar, and we call that seasonality, right? Seasonality means we look for patterns that happen every April. Our sales go back up because it is time to open our ice cream stand, right? Seasonality. We're pretty good at those in the world of forecasting. We're pretty good at emulating those and seeing what happens in the future. The 2 we're not so good at is cyclical. Cyclical components are, the economy, things tied to the economy. We can't really predict, we try, but we can't really predict the next recession or depression, right? We try, but we can't really do that. And the famous adage is, a rising tide raises all ships. Well, a lowering tide lowers all ships. So, if we have a recessionary period, even though my sales might have been trending upward, well, boom, the economy went into recession, I'm out of luck, okay? Talk to the automakers in 2008, 2009, didn't matter what they were doing, their sales went down. And the last one is the hardest to predict, and that is random effects. And I think I used, you're working in a fast food restaurant, and just randomly, 3 buses decide to pull up. So all of a sudden, you are 10 to 20 times busier than you've ever been. Okay? Random effects, can't predict it. Now, if it has a stationary trend, which we can look at by graphing it and also looking at the R-squared value, which is called the coefficient of determination. There are techniques we can use for stationary trends. You saw some of those. Last period technique, moving average, weighted moving average, and exponential smooth. Okay, those are the 4 techniques that we used for stationary. If it has linear trend, what was the one method we said is dominant? If it has linear trend, we use least squares regression. Okay, least squares regression. Finally, chapter 9. Should be very fresh in your minds as we reviewed at the beginning of class and did homework. But that's queuing analysis. Okay, so queuing analysis, understand the way we classify queues, those 5 characteristics that we went over at the beginning of class. Understand what Markovian means, Poisson arrival, exponential service. Understand what steady state is, transitionary period. Understand what those symbols mean that we were talking about, like L, L sub Q, W, W sub Q, rho, P sub W. Understanding what those are is important. Some of the terms that we covered, like balking and jockeying, they might be on there. So 30 multiple choice worth a 1.5 each. That means a total of 45 points. Now the 4 problems that you'll be presented. The first one, and you can do 3 of these, you choose. The first one will give you a precedence relationship chart, project management precedence relationship chart. It will ask you to draw a project diagram, a network diagram, and figure out the early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and critical path. Now you can use Excel to do that, right? You have open book, open notes, or you can do the forward pass, backward pass, whichever you would like. But I will give you a small project, roughly 8 tasks, and you will have to figure out the critical path, the early start, early finish, late start, late finish of all the activities. The second one that you will have will give you a situation. Okay, it will give you a situation, and you will have to come up with a payoff table, kind of like the one we did for the take-home exam. Okay, so what the heck was that one? The TV one, right? You'll have to come up with a payoff table, and then give me the answer under various decision criteria. Once again, you can use Excel for this. Okay, so you don't have to do them by hand, but you have to come up with a payoff table. Give me the decision under max or min, max regret, and maybe max or max, something like that. Okay, so a decision analysis problem. The third one will be a forecasting problem, where I'll give you, 7 or 8 data points over 7 or 8 months. And I'll ask you to forecast the next month using various techniques. It'll be a stationary one. So, maybe the weighted moving average, the moving average, last period technique, something like that. Once again, you can use Excel to do that. But it's small and simple. And the last one is a queue, but all I'll do is I'll give you the situation, okay? And I'll ask you to identify the type of queue it is. Is it an MM34 queue? Is it an MM1, 25 queue? Okay? And then I'll ask you to figure out what lambda is and what mu is. And you don't have to figure out anything. You don't have to plug it in the template. You just have to identify the queue, classify it, and then figure out what lambda and mu is. And you'll do the 3 that you like best. You choose 3 of the 4. Those are all worth 5 points apiece, so that's 15 points for a total of 60 points. Any questions on the in-class? It'll be done next week, April 7th. Yeah?
What year can we start before class? Or do we have to wait until 6?
I'm usually around, I'll get here like between 5 and 5:30, so yeah, you can start then. That'll work. Let's say, I can't forget this though. Let's say 5:15. Yeah, okay. 5:15. Any other questions on the in-class or the take-home? Okay, so, we're wrapping up this course. So that was, the midterm is behind us. The final is before us. And the other thing that's before us that we need to address is the group project. And I know a lot of you guys have paired up at this point and, have ideas and things you're considering. So I'll take any questions, general questions that you might have at this point. And if you don't have any general questions, I will donate the remainder of the time to your group project. So you may group together, you may leave, or you may ask me questions about your group project if you like. Okay. Yes, sir.
So we're in a group, you want just one paper, like one?
Yes, very good question. So if you're in a group, you all get the same grade. I don't do like any peer evaluation, because that's usually ends up being BS anyways. Because everyone has an anchor, right? Almost always. There's always an anchor. There is those. So everyone's going to get the same grade, whether you were a nominal contributor or the star of your group. One paper, one presentation. People have asked me, well, hey, my group, I can't be there that day, which is April 21st. And I said, well, if your group is okay with that, I'm okay with that. So, maybe you contribute more to your paper then. But your group has to present, right? Your group has to present. I would like you to stick around for all group presentations. Don't say, I'm going to do 2 and then leave. I know your life is important, but so is mine. And so is watching your classmates display what they have learned. Okay, so don't ask me, hey, can I just watch 1 and leave? Don't. Okay, no, you may not. You have to be here. The presentation itself, I'd say 10 to 15 minutes. It's not a long presentation. You're going to introduce the environment, the problem, the situation, where you got the data, the model you used, the results, and your recommendations. And I do want you to, address us, the class, as if you were addressing this at work. You're addressing your boss. You don't have to say, I don't like role playing, so you don't have to pretend I'm your boss or anything like that. But I want it to be that, that kind of presentation. It's not an academic research thing. You don't have to cite the book. You don't have to cite Dr. Miko said this in class. Do it like it's a work project is what I want, okay? People always ask, how long does a paper have to be? You don't ask your boss that, do you? You don't say, how long does this have to be? You just say, how long does it have to be to get it done and get it done right? That's the answer to that, yes? So, one paper, one presentation, one grade. Other questions? Okay, well, we'll break up, and then I'll be here. I'm going to stay here. If you have questions specifically to your project, I'd be more than happy to answer them.